Hello everyone, I'm Chuck and welcome to Chuck's Contractor Corner. I will be creating this video essentially as kind of an introductory video to the podcast itself to kind of give you guys a background on who I am, on why I'm starting this podcast, some of the special segments that we're going to have ideally in each and every podcast that we'll be recording and then posting, some of the platforms that we'll be kind of hosting this on, and kind of what the purpose of this whole podcast is. This is something I've wanted to do now for quite some time, is start a podcast and just to be able to chat and network with other people, and I didn't really know which theme or kind of topic I wanted to cover, so I kind of just put that to the side and years ago kind of told myself, you know what, eventually some kind of opportunity will pop up and hopefully I'll be able to kind of take advantage of that. So here I am now 3 years into my contracting business, and I've essentially decided to start this podcast with kind of a blue collar contracting theme. That's kind of the main overview, I guess, of the podcast. So obviously some of the guests that we'll be hosting will be blue collar contractors from various industries. Obviously I'm part of the snow removal industry, so there will be a heavy focus there on the snow removal side, both residential and commercial. But essentially I'm kind of opening up this podcast topic to essentially the entire blue collar industry. So whether you're an electrician, a solar guy, plumber, HVAC, concrete, any outdoor type of contractors, I'll be having all sorts of contractors on the show. I'm also going to have a few kind of industry specific individuals on the podcast. So whether that be marketing specialists that specifically target blue collar contractors, or having a few clients on the podcast. So I'm actually going to have a few clients. We've got a few lined up, and I'm just going to kind of give, the other side of the coin, right? So what is it like hearing from other clients that have dealt with a bunch of contractors, both cheap and more expensive, more reputable, contracting operations, and kind of give us some feedback to some contractors out there. So if you're just a regular, person listening to this podcast because you either know me personally or you've just kind of fallen upon this, good on you. I'd love, your support, obviously, but this is obviously something that's tailored for blue collar contractors. So specifically snow contractors. Obviously I'm in the industry myself, so that's kind of a bit of a focus there. But yeah, that's kind of just a brief overview of the podcast itself. And in this video, I'm essentially going to kind of dive deep into, who I am and really what the reasons are I want to start this. So I'm Chuck. I grew up in Orleans in the eastern suburb of Ottawa. I grew up pretty regular childhood and a regular life, I would say. I had parents that were married up until I moved out of the house. I played sports growing up. I played some competitive hockey, competitive baseball, among volleyball, football, some other sports. I was heavily involved in playing sports as a kid. And as I grew up, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I was lined up to go to university, and the last semester at school, I decided, you know what, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I want to take, and I'm not going to university. So I decided to kind of go out into the workforce and kind of work odd jobs to kind of try and see if there's something I liked. I worked various jobs within security, construction, and then I actually moved out west, out into Alberta. I worked there in the oil rigs for about a summer, and then I actually got a call from the military and ended up coming back here to Ottawa to start that just a couple months later. I started in the military when I was 20. I did 4.5 years as a Army communication and information systems specialist. I'm essentially focusing on radios, antennas, communication systems, that kind of stuff. I served for 4.5 years until I was released in 2017, at which point I started working for the city of Ottawa here with the public transit system called OC Transpo. For those of you in Ottawa that know that system, it's a pretty bad public transit system, to say the least. But I definitely got some good experience with those positions I had there. I started out as a bus driver for about a year, and then I moved on to the special constable unit, so essentially the security division of OC Transpo, as a communications officer / dispatcher. So we were kind of the liaison between other departments, emergency services, and the special constables actually enforcing essentially the rules and policies, bylaws, that kind of stuff out on the transitway. I kind of got tired of that a little bit and decided to join the rail team. There's a new LRT system in Ottawa that started. That was been back in 2018, 19-ish. And so I started there actually right when COVID started, pretty much in March of 2020 is when I started that position. I did that for 2 years. years, and that was as a electric rail controller, which essentially I worked in the same room as the communications officer position. We were just over in the next stall, and we essentially kind of managed that entire rail system. Pretty much everything was controlled remotely from the transit operations control center, and I really enjoyed that work. To be honest, it was operational. It was a lot of reactive operations where we were just kind of thrown issues with the system and had to deal with those, whether it be a severe derailments. I actually came in and was the controller 30 minutes after derailment happened. So that's a lot of that operational experience that I kind of carry over to my snow removal company. Kind of comes from my background within the military, the communication side, and then obviously with the electric rail controller position, they're kind of controlling a big system, and obviously there's maintenance to that, there's some of the infrastructure side to that. But yeah, I really enjoyed that position, and that kind of prepared me pretty well for the operationalness of snow removal and the operations that kind of come with it. Obviously you're going out in the shit when it's snowing and it's not super nice out. You know, most people are staying indoors during those bad storms, and obviously we're heading out pretty much in the middle of it to go out and service hundreds of residential laneways in a town that I now call home, which is Embrun, Ontario. It's about 30 minutes southeast of Ottawa. And this is pretty much where I make my home now. So this is the contracting company that I've started now in this town. We have about 8,000 people in this town, so it's not very big. And the service that we run is not going to scale up to thousands, 3, 4, 5,000 residential laneways. It's just not doable in the town that we live in. We do have hopes of eventually expanding into some nearby towns, pending some agreements with certain people. And we'll see how that kind of develops over the next couple of years, but we're definitely interested in expanding into in a town next over, which is actually part of our township officially. So the plow schedule and everything kind of runs the same. But yeah, that's kind of to be determined at this point. But for the podcast itself, the reason I pretty much started this podcast was essentially to kind of just be able to elevate the contracting industry as a whole by providing valuable stories to other contractors from other obviously successful, but some not as successful contractors. So obviously we're going to have a wide range of guests on the show here. It's going to be ranging from small $200,000-$300,000 a year in revenue operations up to 5 to 10 million pretty much. So our goal is to really kind of hit every kind of segment within the business journey. So obviously starting out in those first couple of years, kind of the current operations, and obviously kind of their future vision and what they hope to kind of accomplish in the next year, 2, 3 years, 5 years, whatever those aspirations to be. And so I got into contracting 3 years ago now. I started my residential snow removal company here in Embrun. And the main reason I think for starting this was just to kind of be able to do something myself and be my own boss. I think it kind of comes down to that, but also because I kind of knew I had it in me on a professional level to kind of be able to kind of skim that balance between being a professional contractor, but also being a contractor, right? So obviously being a contractor comes with kind of being rough around the edges naturally. I think deep down, I definitely am that person that is rough around the edges, but I can definitely, with the background that I've had in communication, I'm able to kind of fairly clearly communicate my message, whether that be in writing or in person, to be able to kind of elevate the business that I'm operating, and just to kind of make it a little bit more professional. And obviously the snow contracting industry is kind of an industry that's known to attract kind of some scummy and crooked contractors. I'll just put it bluntly. Obviously everybody out there knows there's a fair share of crooked and crummy contractors that kind of skip town. They'll collect a bunch of deposits, skip down, go over to Montreal, do the same over there, go down to Toronto, do that, and then come back up and kind of rotate that through a 3-4 year period. And I've seen my own fair share of articles, coming out about certain contractors screwing around with certain people and those kind of stories. So that's, I would say, that kind of the main reason I've decided to start this podcast is really to kind of elevate the industry as a whole, and to kind of call out and address, the scummy practices that some contractors have. There's a lot of good contractors out there that I know that are good people, and they might share some things with me. It's just like, I'm not really down to kind of follow suit with that and to do those types of things in my own business, for the main reason that the client's eyes are kind of what's important, right? Whatever your clients think of you is obviously what's important. If you run a business and you really don't care about your clients at all, and you just kind of have the attitude of, I'm going to just do whatever I need to do to make money and run a business that's just going to stay afloat, then that's on you. But that's not what I want to do. I really want to be able to elevate not only my business, but the industry as a whole by providing some valuable stories here about other contractors and kind of their journeys. So obviously I'm a snow removal contractor at heart, the bread and butter. I was temporarily a fence installation contractor as well for a couple of years. I've essentially started doing that in summer since I quit my city job back 3 years ago. And I've pretty much since decided that the fence industry isn't necessarily an industry that I want to be a part of actively. Obviously, I'm always going to know how to build a fence, and that's always a good skill to have, not only for myself, but some friends and family of mine that want to get a fence done, which can obviously be a pretty pricey project. But yeah, when it comes to the fencing industry, I just, there was multiple factors that kind of led me to remove myself from that industry, some of which I'm not going to share, but the main things are essentially I've got a lot of buddies and people I know that are in that industry, specifically in the same area that I'm in. And instead of trying to kind of grow this and build it up to a company that's, much larger than some of the other companies around, I've just kind of decided to kind of exit that industry and work on some other projects. So obviously I'm working on this podcast now. And I'm also working on some other AI project that I've got going on that I'm sure you guys will hear about soon enough. But that's kind of the contracting experience that I have. So the 3 years in residential snow removal. The first year we were pretty successful with this business. Obviously we ended up with 125 laneways. The second year, we ended up tripling our business, or virtually tripling it up to 360 clients, or just over that. And in this past winter here, we went up to almost 430. So we've definitely seen some good growth over the last 3 years. Not as much as I thought I would get, let's say, from last year to this past winter here. Obviously, the winter we had, not this past winter, but last winter was just over 100 centimeters here in the Ottawa area, which is really not a lot for given the climate that we're in, and that definitely affected the renewals for this past winter here. But we were obviously able to find a great amount of new clients, and obviously every year our goal really as a company is to be able to create new snow removal clients on the residential side. So obviously we have competitors in our area here, but the goal isn't necessarily to just scoop up all our competitors' laneways. We want to obviously still have some competition. That way it keeps us pushing in the industry and continually making changes to improve our service. But the main thing is to be able to essentially create a lot of new snow removal clients and have up that percentage of people in the town here that actually hire for snow removal, which isn't quite a lot. It's definitely not up to where the bigger cities are like Montreal and Ottawa. Some of those suburbs you'll see, 50% or more in some areas of Montreal of households actually hiring a residential snow contractor. So we'd like to get that up to those levels. The 50% level for me would be phenomenal. Density wise, we're able to have a lot of density if we're able to pick up, even anywhere between 40 and 50% of the households on certain streets. Some streets obviously for us are stronger than others. We have some streets right at around near my house that obviously have, up to 40, 50%, but that's really just our concentrated area here. We have some other areas that don't have as many, right? We have some houses where it's literally a few percent of the households on those specific streets that we have. So we're really looking to kind of up that density. And that way it actually gives us the flexibility to buy more tractors and actually improve the service itself. So instead of having, 200 properties on one tractor, very dense, we can split that up and have, 100 and 100, and we're able to finish routes in, under 3 hours really, because we're able to essentially perform about 160 properties, clear 160 properties within about a 4.5 hour period. And so if we're able to really dial that in and get some more density, that's kind of the goal for the next several years. So that's pretty much it for the snow removal business itself. Obviously, I've learned a lot with that journey, and I'm definitely able and willing to share some of that advice. But we're obviously looking to get some heavy hitters on this podcast here and get some companies that are in the 2, 3, 4, 5,000, hopefully up to the 7, 8,000 range. We've got a few companies that we know that we're in contact with that have those numbers, and we'd really like to have those people on the podcast, some of which have already been on, but we're obviously looking to just provide that much more value to some of those smaller companies, snow removal companies starting out. Obviously I've posted about this podcast a few times on my personal page and in a few groups and that kind of stuff. I've always wanted to start a podcast like this. This is really kind of the main, reason why I wanted to start this, was really to just be able to provide value back to others. Obviously my own journey. I can only learn so much from it. So obviously I'm learning from other people's journeys as well. But the idea is to have listeners that are obviously within the blue collar contracting industry. And if they can just take one or two pieces of advice from the podcast that we'll be recording and implement that into their business, and they're able to improve their margins or improve their efficiency, then that's really the goal. If contractors can use even more advice and implement even more of some of the things they're learning from this podcast, even better. But really, the target here is really those contractors out there that are, trying to scale their business and are unable to due to whatever reason. And if they're able to listen to this podcast and get a few tips and tricks and learn from that, that's obviously a huge benefit. Obviously, providing value for me is kind of the first and foremost thing. Obviously, this is obviously a networking opportunity for me as well, but I just want to be able to provide some value back to contractors. And some of the special segments we're going to have in this podcast are two segments specifically. One will be a work-life balance segment where we're going to talk about essentially what that looks like as a contractor. How do you balance your personal life and your work life? Being the owner of a business, obviously that, you're working, 8, 10, 12, 16-hour days at some points. I think everybody's situation is different. If you don't have kids and you don't have a significant other, obviously I would hit the ground running and be working those 16-hour days. I'm in a position where I'm married now and I've got a 4-year-old son. So I'm into the family life now where being a contractor becomes a little bit more complicated, obviously. You have to be able to balance that if you want to be present in your personal life, right? If you have friends and family that you see every week or every 3-4 days, I mean, personally for us, we're pretty close with our family, my wife and I. So we have, whether it be my sister, my brother, my parents, her siblings, that visit us. That's just part of our life is just spending a lot of time with family and friends. And so this segment in the podcast will just be, kind of getting other contractors' opinions on what that looks like for them and how they maybe balance their work life. I think for myself, I coach baseball at night. I'll be getting involved with hockey this next winter. So there's a lot of personal time that's taken up for me with just volunteering and kind of giving back to the community. I think that's another important aspect of kind of work-life balance, is not only just, making money and trying to work on your business, but it's also kind of giving back, either on behalf of yourself personally or on behalf of your company, but to give back to the community, whether that be sponsorships. I think giving back on behalf of your company is definitely something that's important. I coach a T-ball team. I coach a rookie ball team on Tuesday and Thursday nights. And just that hour and a half of time of me giving back is not only valuable for myself and my own development on the leadership side, but it's also obviously good for the kids, right? If you're able to become a better leader and be a leader to these kids, it's also good for your own family life. Seeing my son watch me coach other kids and disciplining and, teaching and coaching other kids is beneficial for my own son as well, right? So obviously he's looking and listening and he's a very observant child. So obviously he's paying attention to what I'm saying and doing with other kids. And he's able to learn from that and then kind of become a good leader himself, right? That's kind of the goal, or at least one of the goals for me to essentially give back to my community is to have my son look at me and see me do these things, right? So obviously I have a huge passion for baseball. So for me to coach other kids in that sport, it's very easy for me. And I really just try and work on the personal relationship and some of the lessons that I can give those kids that are kind of lifelong life lessons, right? Not necessarily just baseball lessons and how to catch the ball and hit the ball. But a lot of it is really just giving back and just building better kids. I mean, nowadays with society and the way we're kind of headed, I think communities need more people that are willing to kind of give their time and coach and provide some valuable lessons for kids in the future generations. So obviously as a podcast, that's one thing obviously that my son sees me doing is interviewing other people. And I explain to him, trying to make other contractors better by having them listen to my podcast and having them listen to the experience that our guest has kind of gone through, right? So now I know I'm kind of rambling on here, but I'm just, trying to go off the cuff and kind of explain the reasoning, for this podcast, and obviously kind of giving you guys a tidbit of who I am, essentially. So yeah, in terms of the topic, so that's one of the topics, which is essentially the work-life balance portion. The other topic is AI and technology. So I've dove deep into researching essentially AI, automations, and that all kind of blends together. Obviously, automations can incorporate AI into them, but a lot of automations are pretty standard, and it's not necessarily anything that's artificially intelligent when it comes to kind of reasoning and memory and that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, a lot of the research I've done has just kind of exposed me to the automation world and what's available out there. And it's just absolutely breathtaking, the amount of tools, the amount of workflows, and the amount of just automations that are out there to be able to simplify businesses. And this kind of comes back around to kind of the work-life balance, right? If you're able to kind of implement a lot of these automations and a lot of these AI tools and bots and agents and all this stuff, obviously there's a lot of terms out there, but anything to kind of simplify the kind of mundane and boring tasks within your business, I think is a huge benefit. And again, it kind of comes back to that work-life balance where you're able to set aside, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a week of time and creating these automations to be able to handle that work itself so that you can spend more time not only on your business, but giving back to your own community, right? So it all kind of a big circle. And for me, that's kind of the gist of this podcast here, is obviously hearing other people's business journeys, but then also, questioning them and kind of getting their opinion and insights on what a work-life balance looks like specifically. Where does AI and automations kind of fit into that to be able to automate processes, but not to lose that touch with your clients, right? So that's one thing we're going to be focusing on this upcoming winter within our snow removal business, is really implementing as much AI and automations as possible to be able to just simplify our business itself, but also keeping that at a very basic level, or as basic as it can really be. Because automations, the more you have automations and AI incorporated into your business, the more complex it can really get, right? It's just more to handle, more to check up on, but being able to simplify your automations within your business, I think, is really important, along with keeping that personal touch, right? So obviously for myself, my company is called Chuckin Snow. I'm known as Chuck. So obviously there's a branding play there, and there's a personalization within the brand that I want to keep, right? So within my own community, it's obviously a little bit easier in the size of town that we're in. But if you're in a big city, some of that can kind of get tough, right? You kind of have a company name, you're the owner, but there's no connection there. And so our goal, or at least my goal, is to really present a very personalized branding when it comes to our company, in the communication style, the posting style, anything that is client facing. I want that to be somewhat personalized and unique. But at the same time, we're trying to implement some automations, obviously, to simplify that process and to make sure that we can efficiently run this business and be able to handle, all the complaints and all the requests, all the quotes, in the fall, and everything that kind of comes with running a snow removal business itself. So, and then obviously some of the stories that I plan to kind of uncover through these contractor interviews in the podcast is obviously the good, the bad, the ugly, right? That's kind of where I want it to be, is obviously the good things that, the companies are doing, obviously for other companies to be able to implement some of these changes within their own business, but as along with the bad and the ugly. Obviously, we know that for you contractors out there, that there's definitely a lot of bad and ugly within, whether it be regular operations, starting your business, whether it be trying to scale up. A lot of contractors are kind of facing bottlenecks within their business and are not able to kind of come up through those and flourish on the other side of it. And so if we can kind of uncover some of these stories of more successful business owners and contractors, and what were they able to kind of do to get through those bottlenecks and come out of it, right? So that's some of the content that I kind of hopefully will try and gather from other contractors. Obviously a lot of the mistakes that they've made in the past is something that's important as well, so that, new business owners can essentially fast track their business journey and being able to scale their business by avoiding some of the ugly stuff that other contractors have gone through. And a lot of that, yes, a lot of business owners out there will say you need to learn by doing, and yes, you're going to make mistakes. In my opinion, yeah, you can make all the mistakes you want, but if you can avoid a lot of those mistakes, it's not only going to save you money, but it's going to save you time. Maybe not lessons down the road, but at least it'll save you some time and money up front by avoiding some of those mistakes. Yeah, and the reason I plan to feature contractors across different revenue levels, so anywhere between the 2 to 3, 4, essentially under 500 K a year in revenue, all the way up to the kind of the 5 million, 10 million plus type of operation, is really just to be able to provide a wide range of insights and lessons for other contractors. Obviously, different phases in business can bring different problems. And if you're in the starting point of your business journey, you're only making $200,000-300,000, and you're planning on scaling this this upcoming year to 3/4 or up to $1 million in revenue, listening to $5 to $10 million a year contractors and some of the lessons and stuff that they've gone through, that might have been back 10, 15, 20 years ago when technology and the society as a whole wasn't the same. Right. So being able to hear from some of those contractors that are at the 500K range, kind of penetrating through up to the $1 million mark, other smaller contractors will be able to kind of learn from those kind of small to mid-level contractors. Right. So this is not a podcast where I'm trying to get all these $5 to $10 million guests on. It's really going to be a wide range of contractors and revenue levels so that the value can be as great as it can possibly be. Obviously, we're going to not only were we going to bring on some featured guests within the contracting world. So obviously contractors from different levels or different trades, ranging from electrical to plumbing to HVAC to outdoor contractors like fence contractors, concrete contractors, irrigation, sealing, power washing, whatever type of contractor that serves a home business. And that's kind of what we're targeting here. Now, obviously there's commercial operations as well. So we're obviously looking to have some commercial contractors on as well, but the residential contractors is definitely something that we'll be kind of focusing on more so. But beyond those contractors, we're going to be bringing on industry experts as a whole. So whether it be within marketing, whether it be within sales, anybody that kind of focuses in the blue collar contracting world, those are the type of people we'd like to get on the show here. We already recorded a couple episodes with some non-contractor industry expert type people. One of them being a marketing expert that services seasonal businesses and seasonal contractors. And we're also going to have on some clients that are essentially have hired multiple contractors in the past, what their experiences were like, what their expectations are. And really my goal is to be able to bring on at least 3 or 4 or 5 of my own clients and kind of question them about their experience with my own company, question them about their experience with other contractors. Ideally, I'd like to have guests on that have hired, at least 4 or 5 different contractors, potentially one that's been screwed over, and kind of get that story of what that looks like from a client perspective. Just to be able to essentially provide more value to contractors out there. So if you're able to kind of learn a thing or two from what client expectations look like, especially in the residential snow removal industry, I think that's a huge industry when it comes to customers being picky. And obviously when the snow is falling, they want it done now. They don't want it done, in 12 hours from now. Whereas the lawn industry is much different, right? The grass is only going to grow so much in the next day. If they're only there tomorrow because it's raining today, there's not as much of an issue. But with the snow removal industry, it's a very, very time sensitive operation, right? So any breakdown, any 15 to 30 minute delay with one tractor can be amplified at the end of the route. And so I think bringing on some of my own clients and kind of getting their perspective. And I mean, obviously I'm going to learn from this, but I want all of you guys out there to kind of learn from this. And whether you're in the snow industry or not, I think you'll be able to learn something from, what hiring a snow removal contractor looks like, because it is a very unique operation. So my goal for this, essentially year 1 of this podcast for me, is to essentially release 52 podcast episodes. So 1 per week for the next year. So I'm kind of putting that out there in the airways, if you will. We're June 24th right now, the day that I'm recording this. So ideally, I'd like to be posting 1 per week, essentially until next Canada Day. To be honest and transparent with you guys, I really couldn't care less about how many subscribers are subscribing to the YouTube channel or the Spotify channel or the Apple podcast or whatever it is. We're going to be obviously streaming on as many channels as we can, but I think the primary one will be YouTube. We're obviously going to have a Facebook page with some short form content on there as well. I really want to kind of build a brand around this podcast and kind of around myself as a contractor, as a father, as a coach, and trying to simplify business. I think contractors are kind of missing out with overcomplicating things and not putting in any automation or any type of things that can kind of help them save time and money within their business. So that's kind of my goal, is to put that out there. I'm obviously going to be posting about my journey with AI, with automation, with work-life balance. So you'll be seeing all sorts of different type of kind of content, short form content on this podcast channel. So obviously there'll be the main podcast, which will generally range from anywhere between 40 minutes to an hour and a half. Obviously, I'm trying to keep that on the shorter end, but I also want to give out as much value as I can. So for those of you that will listen to an hour and a half of a podcast, I know it won't be all of you, but if there are going to be a few of you guys and you're able to learn a few things from that, then that, that makes me happy. But yeah, so I'll be posting some, a bit of personal stuff. I'll be posting kind of some tips and tricks on work-life balance and what coaching and community volunteering opportunities and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the goal for year one, is to just kind of be able to post consistently, and I'm really not worried about the amount of subscribers. Obviously, I would love everybody's support. So whether you're a contractor or not, if you know me personally or not, and you've enjoyed this video up to this point, you're still here, well, I've done a good enough job to keep you on the line. So, but I'll definitely be doing my best to put as much valuable content out there as I possibly can. In terms of feedback and engagement that I'm obviously hoping for from listeners, as obviously as much as you can, right? Just a simple like on the video or just a simple comment with a couple emojis, obviously helps the social media algorithm just to be able to broaden the reach. So by all means, if you're a contractor and you're getting value out of this podcast, feel free to share stuff, whether it be the short form content, the long podcast. We're placing a big importance on the short form content that we're going to be putting out, because we know that a lot of that is very quickly absorbed. It's much easier to kind of go through some shorts and listen to that type of content rather than sitting down for an hour and a half listening to a podcast. But by all means, if you guys are out there in your trucks and you've got an hour and a half to kill, feel free to throw on a podcast and within your industry. Hopefully, eventually, once we start posting on a weekly basis, I'm going to be making different playlists from different industries, so you can kind of go directly to those playlists and be able to drop down your industry. And then the idea is obviously to have at least a handful of podcasts per industry or per main industry. But by all means, if you are listening to this video and you're a contractor and you want to be featured on my podcast, feel free to reach out to me. By all means, I'm going to give essentially everybody a shot at being a guest here on the podcast. I mean, we've already got, I think we're at 17, 18 episodes now that we've got recorded. We've only released the one video, but we're just trying to line up as much content as we can in advance, so we can just kind of systemize the posting process and just kind of have that all automated to kind of go out automatically. By all means, these won't be a polished podcast. It won't be, super highly edited. It will be edited to take out some of the pauses and the ums and ahs and some of the content that's not necessarily as important or relevant. But that being said, it will be a very raw and somewhat unfiltered podcast. I'm not too worried about language and opinions and that kind of stuff. If it's valuable to a contractor out there, then we're going to be keeping it in the podcast episode. So by all means, share everything that you feel is relevant to this show. So that being said, I think I'm pretty much going to wrap up this introductory video. By all means, if you have any questions about the podcast, I will most likely, after posting this video here, will open up kind of a Q&A on stories on Facebook or on YouTube or whatever, type of engagement I can get to kind of get some feedback on how I have outlined this podcast here and kind of the format and what we're going for here. So by all means, if you've got any type of advice, if you've got anything, feel free to reach out to me. You can find me on Facebook as Chuck Jr. That's Chuck Jr. on Facebook. And by email, I can be reached at chuck@chuckinsnow.ca. That's ChuckinSnow.ca. So there is no G in there. It is Chuckin Snow. And feel free to reach out either by email, reach out to me by messenger. I'm pretty responsive to most people that reach out. Unless it screams scam, I will most likely answer you. So for anybody out there, all the contractors, feel free to like and subscribe here to the channel and follow the content. And again, if you want to be featured on this podcast, we're kind of doing going through a pretty big outreach period right now, trying to reach out to as many business owners as we possibly can. Obviously, we're trying to get as much of those lower level contractors as much as the higher level ones, right? So if you're making anywhere between, $250K and $750K in annual revenue a year, reach out to me and I'll make sure to feature you on the podcast, and you'll get a bit of short form content out of that. We do edit some clips afterwards, anywhere between 5 to 10 short form content clips, anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute is kind of what we aim for. And I'll be able to provide you with those clips, several weeks after the podcast once we kind of get around to it. So that being said, thanks a lot for listening. If you listened all the way to the end, I'm Chuck, host of Chuck's Contractor Corner, building blue-collar businesses one story at a time. Thank you, and we'll see you on the first episode.